Wipe that smug look off your face and get out of my table, now. You heard me. Move.
Crystal chatter snaps, silent as red wine scythes toward a composed black CEO at a billionaire's gala. The room expects a flinch. She doesn't blink. She wipes her cheek with the back of her hand, rises, and taps her phone, twice legal on speaker. Conduct breach. Execute. Exit. The sisters' grin buckles, cameras lift, whispers harden. Headlines write themselves before the stain dries. Doors part. She walks spine, straight past white linens, stunned faces, and borrowed power. Final hit? Like a gavel. $2. 4B contract. Canceled on the spot. The ballroom hums with glass and low laughter until a red arc lifts from a crystal jug and hangs in the lights. Conversations stall. Chairs pause mid-scrape. The splash breaks and spills across the neckline of the black CEO in a clean orange dress. She inhales once. She does not leap back. She sets her fork on the plate, steadies the table with her palm, and blinks away the sting as wine threads down her cheek. The billionaire's sister stands close behind the chair in a fitted red gown. Her smile is small and satisfied, the empty jug tilting in her hand. A few guests snicker, others pretend to look at the flowers. Candle flames twitch in the draft, created by so many turned heads. Somewhere, a server freezes with a tray at shoulder height, eyes fixed on the stain spreading like a map. The black CEO keeps her posture level. She pats her forehead with the back of her hand, checks her fingers, and then looks left and right to find the room's center of gravity. She finds it in the cameras. 2 phones are already lifted at the edge of the table. A watch face glows near the cuff of a tuxedo. She meets lenses first, people second. The message is simple. I am present. I am not rattled. She reaches for her phone on the white linen. 2 taps. Screen lights. A line opens to counsel. Her voice stays even. Conduct breach. Prepare the exit under the morals clause. Effective now. On the other end, a calm confirmation clicks in. She sets the device face down. The world around her begins to move again, but at half speed, like the room has been pulled through thick syrup. The billionaire rises from the next chair with his hands spread in a soft performance of concern. He reaches for a napkin and offers it as if that might reverse what has already crossed a line. He says it was a mistake. He says the sister got carried away. Noise gathers behind the words. The guests try to decide which direction looks safest to look at. The sister tips her chin as if daring anyone to call it what it is. A manager at the edge of the ballroom touches an earpiece and signals 2 guards to reposition. Not a rush, a drift. They redistribute the air around the table without brushing anyone. A server finally lowers the tray and backs away, eyes on the floor. A violinist in the trio near the dais stops bowing and pretends to check tuning. The chandelier glow cools against the blue walls, leaving the candlelight to sketch the scene on the tablecloth. The black CEO pushes her chair back. The sound is quiet and final. She stands. Wine dots the bodice and runs in thin lines toward the hem. She takes a cloth from a passing server and presses once at the collarbone. She thanks the server by name after reading the badge. Then she lifts her gaze to the sister, then to the brother, then to the room. The hierarchy flips in the silence. People feel it in their shoulders before they understand it. She speaks to the brother in a measured tone that can be heard across the nearest 3 tables. I will not continue business with a partner who cannot control his house. That is the entire statement. No heat, no raised volume. The words land like weight on a scale. The brother starts to object and stops when he sees 2 executives at the far end already reading their phones. News moves faster than charm. Headlines begin to draft themselves on those screens. Gala incident. Conduct clause triggered. The market reacts to risk signals. The publicist 2 tables over rubs at a tight spot between his eyes and whispers into his phone. The event manager scribbles timestamps on a folded program. The guards ease a path toward the side doors without touching anyone. The violinist lifts the bow again and decides against playing. The sister turns to laugh with a friend and finds no one laughing back. The emptiness where approval should be looks larger than the room. She sets the jug down. The crystal kisses the table and rings longer than it should. The black CEO picks up her clutch. She leaves her place neat. Knife straight. Fork straight. Napkin folded once. A small island of order in a messy sea. She walks the runner that leads toward the corridor. Phones follow from a respectful distance. The camera near the entrance catches her reflection in the dark glass as she passes. The reflection looks like a verdict. At the threshold, she pauses, not to look back, but to take a calm breath, as if sealing the moment. The door opens from inside by a staff member who has been watching her approach. In the quieter hall, her steps sound sharp on polished stone. She lifts the phone again to confirm the instruction. Termination, notice drafted. Delivery to counsel and counterpart, hold public comment for now. She pockets the phone, squares her shoulders, and continues toward a private room where towels and water are waiting. Control the room, control the narrative, control the contract. Inside the ballroom, the crowd fills the space she left. Conversations swell to cover discomfort and fail to do it. The brother stays standing, still holding the napkin, still looking at the door that no longer frames a figure. The sister reaches for a fresh glass and thinks better of it. The event manager steps in to redirect attention to the program. The night continues in name only. The center has already moved. The corridor swallows the ballroom noise until it becomes a distant wash. A staff runner hands over a clean towel and water. The black CEO thanks her, dabs once at the collarbone, then checks the time. 23 minutes to convert outrage into paperwork. She unlocks the phone and opens the deal folder. Morals clause. Conduct breach. Counterparty obligations on event sponsorship and guest behavior. The language is dry and sharp. It was written for nights like this. She starts a conference call with legal, operations, risk, and communications. Cameras are already circling the story, she says. We lead with facts, not feelings. Counsel reads the clause number back and outlines the fastest compliant path. Email draft from counsel to counterpart. Signature authority verified. Payments suspended pending review. Security footage requested from the venue for record. She approves each step without adjusting her tone. Calm is part of the message. Operations chimes in from the West Coast office. Supply chain cutoff can be contained if we act before morning. Payments to vendors are clean through last week. No exposure on penalties if termination cites reputational harm with supporting evidence. She nods to herself and asks for a one-page brief for internal teams. No editorial, just timeline, clause reference, and operational next steps. She adds a single line at the top. We work where we are respected. Communications proposes a holding statement. We do not comment on active matters, but have zero tolerance for conduct that violates professional standards. She trims 4 words and approves. Release only if press calls. No proactive blast. The story will travel without help. She wants the company to look like a steady hand, not a megaphone. Her assistant texts from the ballroom edge. Cameras spotted. 2 influencers, 1 columnist, 1 freelance stringer. She replies with a simple instruction. No escorts, no confrontation. Let them film the exit corridor from the permitted zones. We act like a company that has done this before. The event manager appears at the doorway, cautious, holding a small tray with club soda and a stain remover pen. He apologizes once, clearly, without an excuse. She accepts it and asks for the venue's incident report form. He promises it within the hour and offers a secure room. She chooses a small conference space with a glass wall and a discreet view of arriving elevators. In clear sight, but not on display. Inside, legal sends the first draft of the termination notice. She reads every line, corrects a date, and asks counsel to cite the guest family relationship only as relevant context. No adjectives, no drama. Attach screenshots of witness statements and the short video already posted by a guest. She scrolls to the signature block and confirms authority under the deal schedule. She signs with a pen on a tablet and watches the blue check appear. The billionaire's number lights up. She answers. He starts with the word misunderstanding and shifts to the word apology. He offers restitution and a generous donation to her foundation. She keeps her voice even. The contract is being terminated under the clause you approved. He pushes again with a new figure. She repeats once, we will not continue. He asks if there is anything he can do to reverse it. She says respect cannot be retrofitted and ends the call. Her team routes the notice to counterpart counsel and sets a delivery receipt. Risk confirms that insurance coverage will not be affected by exit on cause. Finance pauses, auto transfers, and posts a temporary hold on joint marketing funds. HR prepares a talking point set for managers in the morning to prevent rumor from leading staff communications. She adds a line at the top of that memo as well. Report harassment or retaliation immediately. No exceptions. The sister appears at the far end of the corridor with two friends, moving too fast, looking for an audience. Security steps half a pace forward and lets the air do the work. The group slows. A friend whispers about the camera behind a pillar. The sister touches her hair and tries a smile that does not land. She turns away as if she had meant to walk that direction all along. The assistant brings a replacement blazer from the car. The fabric sits clean and simple on the shoulders. The stain remains on the dress and she chooses to keep it for now. Evidence speaks. She asks the venue for a copy of the seating chart and timestamps of service near table 7. She sends a note to her board chair with a crisp summary. Incident, clause invoked, contract terminated, financial range of impact and mitigation steps, expect external noise for 48 hours. Communications monitors the first wave of headlines. The ones that stretch the truth are logged but ignored. The ones that get the facts right are archived for record. She instructs the team to avoid adjectives in any reply. Thank you for the inquiry. We do not comment on active matters. Our company applies a consistent standard of conduct to all partners. That line will be copied and pasted many times tonight. She checks the room one last time, then walks back toward the service exit that leads to the car. The driver opens the door. She pauses and looks at the ballroom doors in the distance. Inside, the music has started again, a little louder than before, trying to fill a gap that cannot be filled. She gets in the car and asks to be routed by the office. The team there is expecting her. The night is not over, and the work is clear. Respect, process, and consequence, in that order. The city thins to empty lanes as the car slides toward the riverfront tower. In the lobby, the night crew looks up, surprised and then steady. She nods once in thanks and moves through the turnstiles. The elevator mirrors throw back a cool image of orange fabric marked by a dark bloom. She leaves it. The stain keeps the timeline honest. On the executive floor, lights are already on. Legal, operations, comms, risk, finance, and HR have gathered around a long table with laptops open and mugs breathing steam. She sets her clutch down and asks for a snapshot of impact before anyone reaches for adjectives. Legal summarizes the clause record, the incident report request, the delivered notice, and the chain of evidence. Operations outlines the cutover from the partner supply within 40 hours, no service disruption if they flip at dawn and stagger shipments. Risk counts, reputational exposure windows for 3 days, then a taper. Finance shows the deal book with the upstream effects and proposes a bridge plan using retained earnings. No layoffs, no bonus clawbacks. She listens without interrupting, a palm flat on the table like an anchor. Communications scrolls the live feed. A short guest clip garners attention but not yet frenzy. A columnist posts a thread heavy on speculation. 2 clients ask quietly if their agreements remain stable. She answers herself and lets comms type. All client obligations stand. Our standard of conduct applies to partners, not to you. She approves a memo to account leads by name so that reassurance travels with a voice, not a template. HR raises a hand and requests a reminder about psychological safety for staff who will field questions online. She nods and adds 2 sentences for managers to read out loud in morning huddles. She asks for numbers next. Finance runs a quick scenario. The contract termination removes a major line but does not compromise liquidity. Share repurchase pauses for 1 quarter. Hiring plans pivot from vanity roles to revenue centers. She reduces discretionary travel and increases training funds by a modest margin. No punishment for the team because a partner crossed a line. She wants the staff to feel the company tighten ranks around values instead of tightening belts around fear. The board chair appears on video from a hotel desk. He keeps his remarks short. He backs the termination and asks only whether the evidence chain will satisfy people who prefer denial. Legal answers with a calm yes and references the chronology again. The chair signs off, and the room exhales together without meaning to. The sense of isolation lifts when a principal receives a second voice. Security project stills of the ballroom on the wall. Timestamps show service near the table moments before the splash, then freeze frames of the sister leaning in, then the arc, then the reaction. She studies each image for context rather than drama. She instructs the team to blur faces of uninvolved guests when filing copies to the record. Dignity is not selective. Her assistant lays a fresh blazer across a chair, then pauses. "Keep the dress," the assistant says softly. "We may need it for a deposition." She nods and returns to the agenda. Operations wants permission to call alternate vendors before sunrise. Granted. Finance asks to notify the audit committee with a 2-paragraph update. Granted. Risk proposes a quiet outreach to a ratings analyst who has treated the company fairly. Granted. Comms floats a draft of key lines for her to use if she has to speak on camera in the morning. She trims 3 words and removes anything that sounds like victory. The point is standards, not triumph. She steps into her office for a brief call with her mentor, a retired judge who has seen many kinds of theater. The judge listens to the summary and says only that discipline is often mistaken for coldness by those who have never had to hold a line. The sentence lands with the weight of experience and clears space in her head. She thanks the judge and returns to the table with the steadiness of someone who has rehearsed this scene for years without knowing it. Near midnight, the team assigns owners to every thread. A single page goes out to all hands with times and tasks. She insists on one final paragraph in plain language. "We are good at what we do. We keep our house clean. If someone throws mud at our door, we do not bring it inside." Then she signs with her first name. No slogans, no rallying cry, just a center line everyone can step onto. She asks for a last pass on external risk. Comms warns that morning radio will chase the flash while business outlets weigh the clause and the money. She decides she will not do live interviews. A recorded statement at noon, if needed. Until then, the company speaks through action. The team disperses to their corners. The floor quiets. She stands at the window and watches the river pull the city lights into long threads. The stain has dried, a map of the earlier hour. She allows herself one breath of anger that is private and short, then she lets it go. The night closes in, but not around her. It closes around a decision already made. Dawn flattens the skyline into pale bands as she leaves the riverfront tower for a short run, a habit that clears static before decisions harden. The city is hushed and workable. She tracks breaths to the thud of shoes, files the night into sections, and decides what remains to be done. Back at the office, a small team has coffee ready and screens prepped. Market open is hours away, but anticipation is already a pressure in the room. She changes into a clean blazer over the still marked dress, a deliberate choice. Evidence and posture in one frame. Legal has overnight responses. The venue sends a formal incident report, neutral and precise, attaching stills from multiple angles. Witness accounts are time-stamped and stored. The counterpart counsel replies with a note acknowledging receipt, no argument yet, only hedged phrasing that suggests negotiation is the intended next step. She circles 3 lines and writes hold firm. No addendums, no staged reconciliations. Operations reports the first alternate vendor shipment rolling before sunrise. Trucks are moving, orders will be met. Communications slides a minimal briefing across the table. If asked, say as little as possible while saying enough. We do not comment on active matters. Our values are not a press strategy, they are the operating system. She trims one adjective from the draft and approves. A pre-recorded statement can be taped at noon in a quiet studio we control to avoid live ambush. She will read it once, cleanly. The footage will be archival rather than performative. Her assistant pings with a private update. The sister posted a late-night image that attempts levity and lands wrong. Comments tilt fast, mixed with sympathy, sarcasm, and demands for an apology. She does not respond. She is not in that conversation. She is in the contract and in the company. The brothers team floats a breakfast request, framed as a chance to prevent escalation. She declines without contempt. The line has already been drawn in ink. There is nothing to prevent except confusion. HR shares the morning plan. Managers open with a 2-minute readout, then leave room for questions. No speculation, no gossip incentives. Employees get a single intranet post with clarity around workloads and clients. No one is punished for yesterday's weather. Training budgets remain intact. She signs the note with her first name again and adds a line that thanks night shift staff by name, the ones who cleaned spill trays and guarded doors while headlines warmed up. At 9, the first call from a major client comes through, polite on the surface, anxious underneath. She takes it herself. She explains the clause, the standard, the continuity plan. We are steady, your timeline holds. The voice on the other end eases. The call ends with a promise that trust, once confirmed under stress, deepens. She writes it down. It is a reminder that storms can prove a roof rather than expose a crack. Finance watches pre-market chatter. The stock softens by a fraction, and then steadies as a trade writer posts a short piece focused on governance rather than spectacle. She highlights that link for the board and thanks the analyst privately with a note that says, "Simply appreciate the focus on facts." She does not trade words for praise. She trades them for alignment. By late morning, a courier arrives with a bouquet from the brother, the card unsigned but obvious. Security routes it to a side table. She lets it sit. Apology, as centerpiece, is not the currency here. The currency is conduct and consequence. She drafts a short reply to counterpart counsel repeating the termination rationale and instructs legal to proceed with a clean wind down of joint initiatives. If the other side wants meetings, they can meet the paper. Noon approaches. The studio is a quiet glass room with a microphone and a plain backdrop. She steps in with a stained dress under the blazer, sits, and reads the single paragraph she approved. We hold ourselves and our partners to consistent standards of professional conduct. Last night, those standards were not met. Under our agreement, we have ended the relationship. We will continue serving our clients and supporting our teams. Thank you. She does not take questions. The file is saved and distributed to outlets without ornament. After the taping, she returns to her desk for a brief message to staff. She keeps it human and brief. Work on your plan, protect your focus. If you face online noise, elevate it to your manager. If you need support, ask early. No one here stands alone. The mailroom sends up a stack of printed letters from community partners who depend on contracts downstream of the canceled deal. She signs assurances on each, attaching the transition schedule so they can plan with confidence. By afternoon, the company's rhythm begins to reassert itself. The phones sound normal, the inbox is busy but sortable. She meets with the product for 30 minutes to review a launch timeline that should not be held hostage by last night. Presence at the tactical level signals that the business still breathes. She ends the meeting by asking for a single improvement that can ship this week to remind the team that momentum is theirs to make. As the day arcs toward evening, a second wave of commentary tries to turn the story into a spectacle again. She denies interviews and points back to the statement. Friends text support, a few urge a victory lap. She says thank you and declines. The point is not revenge and never was. The point is culture that holds under strain. She looks out over the river as dusk inks back the skyline and feels the company under her feet like a structure she trusts. The stain is still there, a quiet witness. It will go to the cleaners when the record is complete, not earlier. Night settles without ceremony as the second day begins to cool. She walks the floor once before sundown, a slow patrol that tells the team she is present. Screens glow with timelines and handoffs. The canceled partners logo is already gone from dashboards, replaced by clean placeholders. She pauses at operations to watch the new vendor feed push an on-time scan. A quiet cheer rises and fades. People return to tasks like rowers catching the same stroke. Legal confirms the delivery receipts from counterpart counsel and the venue. The incident report is signed by staff who worked the table and cross-checked by a manager from another wing. Footage from 3 angles lines up. The chain is neat and unremarkable. The best kind of record. A deposition calendar opens for the following week. She accepts a slot and blocks 90 minutes. Her preparation is simple. State what happened. State what was done. State why the clause existed before the night ever began. Risk has a matrix on the wall with boxes colored in soft bands. The largest threat has already peaked. A tale remains in commentary that confuses boundaries with ego. She marks it as noise and leaves it be. Communications tracks coverage toward normalization. The on-site statement plays as a B-roll to other news by late afternoon. She thanks the comms lead. then asks for a note of appreciation to the venue staff, who handled a long night with poise. The message goes out under her signature with 2 names spelled correctly and a line that says, "Thank you for protecting guests without theater." Finance closes the day with a simple slide. Liquidity intact, guidance unchanged. A reserve pulled forward by 1/4 to bridge transition costs. The board chair calls in once more to say the tone inside the company matters more than any line item. She agrees and adds that the tone outside the company is a byproduct of the tone within. Culture prints to the surface under pressure. It is not written later. She steps into a small training room where managers gather for a debrief. They share what questions landed in team huddles and what answers worked without inflaming the story. She listens for patterns. People wanted to know whether standards apply in both directions. They do. People wanted to know if speaking up would be inconvenient for their careers. It will not. She asks HR to set up a short form for reporting partner conduct concerns with the same ease as internal reports. Simplicity invites action. She asks for it by Friday. Her mentor sends a text that reads, "Only keep your feet where your decisions are." She smiles at the brevity and slips the phone away. In her office, she reviews a draft of a policy addition that formalizes what the night made visible: event participation protocols, vendor and partner conduct expectations, a clean path for staff to disengage from hostile situations without penalty. She removes a flourish from the preamble and leaves the verbs as the spine. Expect, requirement, document, escalate. The assistant brings in a small box with the stain removed, now dry cleaned and sealed. She decides to archive it rather than wear it again. Some objects do their work once. She labels the box with a date and a single word record and places it on a high shelf. Evidence has a life cycle. The company has a longer one. Near the window, she takes a last call of the evening from a young founder she sometimes advises. He asks how to hold standards without empty grandstanding. She answers that most discipline is silent and procedural, not dramatic, and that partners learn more from a contract enforced than from a headline chase. He thanks her and promises to write his own clause with plainer language. As lights across the river begin to pixel back into the water, she drafts a short note to staff for the next morning. It reads like a breath. "Thank you for carrying the day with steadiness. We did not trade our focus for noise. We delivered for clients. We looked out for each other. If you need support, you have it. If you see something that crosses our line, you know what to do." She schedules the post and closes the laptop. On the way out, she passes the lobby guard who held the door the night before. She thanks him by name and asks about his shift. He says it was quiet tonight. Quiet is a victory, she thinks. Outside, the air is clear and cool. The story will keep circulating in smaller rings until it spends itself. The company will keep moving in straight lines. A decision made cleanly has a way of simplifying what comes after. She gets into the car, gives the address of home, and watches the city breathe. Tomorrow I will have a routine again. That is the point. Morning returns with the practical weight of calendars and clocks. She arrives early and walks the quiet floor, checking rooms where the day will take shape. In the studio space, a technician tests mics for a webcast town hall. She reviews the run of the show and cuts anything that sounds like theater. The goal is a working conversation, not a performance. Her assistant places a thin folder on the lectern. Inside are 4 cards, each with one word in heavy type: standards, clients, team. Next, she can speak to that without scripts. The town hall fills in a steady flow. Faces appear in windows from warehouses, labs, and home offices. She opens with a short recap that treats everyone like adults. What happened, what clause applied, what steps were taken, and why. She does not linger on the splash or the gossip. She moves quickly to continuity plans and the simple idea that respect is an operating condition, not a luxury. Questions begin to queue. She answers without sparring, even when an edge shows. In the one tense moment, she releases pressure with candor. We will make mistakes, communicating under stress. We will fix them and move on. The chat slows. People take screen grabs of the 4 cards. When the stream ends, she checks the client pipeline. The largest account wants a joint review of delivery schedules inside 72 hours. She takes it as a chance to practice steadiness under an outside clock. Operations drafts a crisp slide with present inventory, alternate vendor arrival times, and 2 backup paths if customs slows a border. She removes the decorative icons and leaves numbers standing on their own legs. That afternoon, she co-leads the call with a product director whose calm voice carries the room. The client signs off with a quiet good "thank you." Relief comes not as applause, but as silence returning to normal. Midday brings the first round of deposition prep. In a glass room with blinds half drawn, she sits with counsel and a court reporter. They practice framing. Keep to sequence. Do not diagnose motive. Describe actions you saw, heard, or documented. She repeats the night in clean strokes. Jug lifted. Arc observed. Contact made. Call placed. Notice signed. Counsel nods. The reporter reads back a few lines. The words sound dry and strong. She leaves the room feeling lighter because facts carry their own weight when you let them. Communications, flags, a live show fishing for a reactive quote. She declines and sends the previously recorded paragraph. The host runs a segment anyway. The company name appears for a minute and disappears under other headlines. That is a victory the team has learned to celebrate. PR shares a note later that evening. The clip with the most traction is the one where she thanks night shift staff by name. Small specifics have a way of anchoring the big story. By late afternoon, she meets a cross-functional group to codify event protocols. The doc is short. Sponsorship terms must include defined guest conduct, language. Staff may disengage from hostile settings without penalty and contact a designated lead. Venue partners must provide incident reporting within 24 hours. She adds one line at the top in plain language. If a situation makes you choose between dignity and optics, choose dignity and call us. The room agrees without hesitation. Policy becomes a map, not a slogan. As the sun slides behind the river, she steps into a mentoring circle with junior managers. They ask how to carry authority without turning brittle and how to course correct a room without raising volume. She talks about stance, breath, and the power of naming one fact and one next step. She tells them leadership is less about absorbing drama and more about moving work forward under pressure. The circle closes with each person writing the one sentence they would read to their team on a hard day. She writes hers too. We are measured by how we hold our line and how we hold each other. She ends the day with a short walk past the lobby desk. The guard who said quiet is a victory nods as she passes. Outside, the city is clear. After a brief rain, she watches the street glow on wet stone and lets the week's heat drain into the pavement. The decision has stopped being a story and settled into a standard. Tomorrow will be logistics again. That return to ordinary work is not a retreat from principle. It is the proof of it. The week tips into its slower middle, the place where discipline either holds or frays. She starts before sunrise with a review of open loops. Every thread is a name and a time, not a haze. Legal has filed the preservation letters. Operations has a grid of shipments with green bars expanding as trucks cross state lines. Communications lists the 3 questions reporters still ask and the single answer that covers them without feeding the fire. Finance posts a snapshot of cash and commitments. HR confirms that managers opened their stand-ups with the same 2 sentences company-wide. The rhythm is not loud, which makes it strong. She walks into a product lab where engineers build next month's release on tables crowded with prototypes. They glance up, gauging whether today will be about the story or the work. She makes that choice for them. Show me what has been unblocked since Monday. A designer rotates a screen and runs a clean demonstration. She asks for one improvement they can ship by Friday that clients will feel. The team settles on a faster onboarding flow. They can cut to half the clicks without risking security. She assigns a cross-team buddy to beat on it for 2 days. The decision generates energy because it touches tomorrow rather than yesterday. By mid-morning, a government client requests a standards briefing. She takes it without staffers, just a legal lead to handle citations. She explains the clause as a routine mechanism, not a moral performance. Contracts must anticipate behavior, not react to headlines. The person across the table nods and asks about continuity under pressure. She walks through the cutover plan step by step, then hands over a 1-page appendix that reads like aircraft checklists. The client thanks her for the absence of theater. That line lands as well as any praise. Back at headquarters, a small group from vendor management assembles in a glass room with coffee rings like tide lines on the table. They came in early to pre-write language for the next year's agreements. She scans clauses built from last week's lessons and tightens verbs. Replace may with must, replace should with will, move escalation timelines from vague to dated, add a plain language summary at the top so a warehouse supervisor can read it and know exactly which lever to pull at 2 a.m. She asks them to test the text with one skeptical plant manager before calling it done. Lunch is a bowl at her desk, eaten while reviewing employee feedback that came through the anonymous form launched Friday. The notes read as everyday truth rather than performance. A driver asks whether it is acceptable to refuse a pickup at a site where he has been harassed by a subcontractor. Yes, and here is the number to call in real time. A junior analyst asks how to shut down a client's off-color joke without losing the account. She writes a short script and sends it to training with a request for role-play scenarios. A facilities tech thanks the company for naming night shift staff in the memo. She forwards that line to the comms lead with a simple, "keep doing this." In early afternoon, her deposition begins in a neutral room with carpet that eats footfall and windows that stare at brick. The lawyer across the table tries to widen the frame into speculation. She does not step into it. Sequence and facts. Jug lifted. Arc observed. Face contacted. Call placed. Notice executed. She does not over-explain and does not reach for adjectives. The court reporter taps keys in a gentle rain. The room exerts no pressure because she has already removed the oxygen that feeds the theater. When it ends, she thanks every person in the room by name, including the clerk who checked IDs. Later, a young manager brings a draft of an internal training called Holding the Room. The slides are tidy and a bit dry, which is a compliment for this topic. She adds a few situations pulled from field notes, a sponsor arriving late and demanding protocol changes, a famous guest ignoring safety rules, a staff member froze in a loud voice. Each case ends with a single next action and a number to call. She replaces the summary quote with a sentence she has used all week. If a situation makes you choose between dignity and optics, choose dignity and call us. By late afternoon, a news cycle tries to pull the story back with a panel segment. She declines an invitation that would reward noise. She records a short message to employees instead. We are doing ordinary work well. That is how this ends. She includes 3 brief wins from teams nobody interviews and sends the note company-wide. The replies collect quietly. A warehouse supervisor sends a photo of pallets staged ahead of schedule. A support rep reports that a frustrated client calmed after hearing the same answer from 2 different people. The consistency is the point. Evening leans in. She meets procurement to schedule a vendor summit for the next quarter. Every partner will sign the new conduct language and walk through scenarios with company staff so the rules are lived, not filed. She closes the document and looks through the glass at people packing bags. The lobby guard raises a hand as she passes. Outside, the city holds a clean chill. The decision that began the week has settled into systems. Heads are clear, lines are visible. Tomorrow will be meetings, deliveries, and small victories that require no announcement. That is the shape of a culture rebuilt in motion. Morning traffic thickens around the river and then thins again by the time she reaches the office. The building's lobby smells faintly of paper and coffee, a working scent. She steps into a small conference room where a whiteboard already carries a neat stack of items for the day. Client review, vendor summit plan, deposition follow-ups, policy rollout, and a quiet note that simply reads, community. She starts there. A nonprofit director joins by video to ask if the canceled partnership will ripple into scholarships that depend on downstream funds. She answers with dates and amounts and sends a bridge schedule that preserves every student award. She authorizes a modest overfill from the company's discretionary fund and asks for quarterly check-ins until new sponsorships backfill the gap. The director's shoulders drop. Gratitude arrives not in adjectives, but in a steadier voice. Legal enters with an envelope of printed affidavits and a checklist of remaining requests. Subpoenas are simple, people are less so. She asks counsel to keep outreach clinical and kind. No one gets ambushed for spectacle, evidence is enough. A paralegal places a bound transcript from yesterday's deposition on the table. She flips to 3 pages marked with tabs, corrects 2 time references, and initials the changes. The mechanical act relaxes the room. Precision gives people something to hold. Communications proposes a short piece for the company blog that distills last week into policy and practice rather than drama. She agrees on one condition: the post cannot mention the gala, the sister, or any version of the splash. Write about standards in supply chain, vendor conduct, staff protections, and how conflict is escalated. Show the forms. Show the numbers. Let the public see scaffolding instead of choreography. The comms lead nods and leaves to rewrite. She meets a small group from analytics to examine secondary effects. Customer support tickets spiked for 12 hours and then settled. Hiring applications rose slightly, with candidates citing the company's stance as a reason to apply. A churn risk flagged on 2 mid-tier accounts has eased after proactive outreach. She circles one number. An internal survey shows higher confidence among night shift workers about raising concerns. That metric matters most to her. People who work unseen should never feel unheard. By late morning, she reviews the vendor summit agenda with procurement. Every attending partner will sign the new conduct language, but the real work is the tabletop exercise. A mixed group walks through fictional scenarios with real constraints and a clock. She pulls out one role play that felt like theater and replaces it with a practical drill. Who calls whom, what gets documented, when the plug gets pulled, how goods are redirected, how staff get home safely. If it cannot be trained in 20 minutes, it will not be remembered at midnight. The brother's office sends a new message requesting private mediation. The language is polished, the appeal earnest. She forwards it to counsel with a 3-word instruction: proceed as documented. A principle is only a principle if it survives polite pressure. She closes the thread and opens a different one. A thank you note to the venue staffer who handed her the incident form without fuss. She writes 2 sentences and spells the name carefully. Courtesy scales when it is specific. After lunch, she hosts a small circle of emerging leaders from across the company warehouse, finance, product, facilities. Each brings one decision from the week that felt heavy and explains how they carried it. A warehouse lead describes refusing a pickup at a site where a subcontractor has a history of slurs and how he rerouted inventory while filing a report. A finance analyst details pausing a sponsorship payment and clearing it through controls. A facilities tech recounts telling a vendor that their foreman would not be allowed on site without remedial training. She listens, asks a single clarifying question in each case, and points back to the same map. Expect, require, document, escalate. Mid-afternoon, an industry association invites her to keynote a conference on leadership under pressure. She declines the stage and offers a panel spot to her operations lead and HR partner instead. Voices closest to execution should be the ones on microphones. She suspects the audience will learn more from checklists than from lines about grit. The organizers accept and adjust the program. As the day softens, she drafts her quarterly letter to staff. It opens with product milestones and client wins, not with last week's noise. The incident appears only as a short paragraph under governance, framed as a system performing as designed. She writes about the small gains that never trend: fewer errors on third shift loading docks, faster onboarding for a government client, a prototype that cut 4 steps from setup. She ends with a sentence that has followed her through each room this week: we are measured by how we hold our line and how we hold each other. Before leaving, she checks on a new customer support trainee who stumbled during a tough call the previous day. They listen to the recording together. She models a calm script for naming a boundary and offering a path forward. The trainee takes notes and laughs once, relieved to discover the company's standard is not perfect delivery but deliberate practice. She schedules a follow-up in a week. Twilight reaches the glass as she heads for the elevator. The lobby guard lifts a hand. Quiet again, he says. Quiet is earned, she answers. Outside, the river lays a narrow band of light along its edge. The week's story has shrunk to fit inside folders, calendars, and muscle memory. The company keeps moving on, rails it built in public. That is the point. The next day's agenda is already on the whiteboard, and none of its items require a headline to matter. A gray morning folds over the river as she steps into a room laid out for the vendor summit. The tables are bare, save for water, thick pens, and a single sheet at each seat titled Conduct and Continuity. No banners, no stage photos. Procurement opens with a 5-minute map of how work flows between companies and where behavior can pinch the line. Then she speaks. We are here to remove ambiguity. Expectations travel faster than crises when they're written plainly. Heads nod for reasons both moral and logistical. Nobody wants to guess at midnight. The first exercise is not a speech, but a drill. Mixed teams get a scenario. A VIP pushes a coordinator, guests start filming, product is time sensitive, traffic is blocked at the dock. Who calls whom? What gets documented? When to cut the program? Where inventory moves next? A logistics manager from a partner sketches a reroute on the whiteboard with the blunt confidence of someone who's done it. Her operations lead adds a timestamp and a phone tree. The room discovers that clarity lowers blood pressure. Legal walks through the clause language with plain verbs. Expect, requirement, document, escalate. A vendor lawyer asks whether the clause binds guests who are not signatories. Counsel points to the section that ties guest behavior to sponsor obligations. The answer lands without heat. People see the shape of the rule. She watches relief move across the tables, the kind that comes when responsibility is shared rather than dumped on whoever is nearest to the problem. During the break, she stands near the coffee urn and listens more than she talks. A warehouse supervisor describes pulling a team early last year when a contractor shouted at a driver. He worried he'd be blamed for delays. She thanks him for choosing safety over speed and tells him the new text makes that decision company policy, not personal risk. He nods and looks a fraction taller. Quiet corrections like this are why the summit exists. Back upstairs, communications flags a fresh wave of takes that try to repurpose the incident into a culture war. She declines to swim in that current. The recorded statement continues to serve, and the company blog post on Standards Not, the gala has begun to travel in professional circles. A trade journal asks for permission to reprint the checklist. She agrees with attribution and no spin. Tools beat slogans. Midday brings the deposition calendar back around. Her slot moves up in a neutral room. Today's counsel tries a subtler line. Pressure you felt, reputational calculations, private motives. She refuses the invitation to narrate feelings. Sequence and facts. She repeats the clean spine of the night and lets silence do the rest. The court reporter glances up once with a faint smile, born of relief at sentences that don't wander. The session ends early because there is nothing left to pry at when the account stays inside its lane. In the afternoon, she convenes a small group to run an audit of the company's public touchpoints. Help pages, delivery notices, on-site posters, badging scripts, the places where tone meets strangers. They strip out fluff, remove any phrasing that begs for approval, and add one uniform line for frontline staff to point to when a situation turns. For everyone's safety, we follow documented protocols. Here is the number to escalate. It reads like common sense, because common sense, when codified, is power. Finance arrives with a plain chart showing transition costs scratched against stabilized revenue. The board chair calls just long enough to say proceed and to ask after team morale. She tells him the number that matters most. A rise in night shift confidence to report issues. He pauses and says, that is the kind of signal worth writing into the annual letter. She agrees and adds a note to herself to publish the metric quarterly. Late day. An email from the brothers' office arrives, with the subject line, Path Forward. It proposes a public reconciliation and a philanthropic partnership. She forwards the note to counsel with 2 words, decline respectfully. Principles that bend for applause were never principles. She closes the thread and signs a stack of letters to community partners confirming the bridge funding schedule she promised. As the building empties, she walks the floor with her assistant, stopping at support to thank a rep who de-escalated a heated caller by naming boundaries and offering a path. He shrugs, a little proud, a little shy. It helps to have the words printed, he says, tapping the desk card. She thinks about how many people carry rooms for a living and how little praise attaches to steady hands. On her way out, she passes the lobby desk. The guard mentions a visitor earlier who asked if the company is hiring. He'd heard about the standards and wanted to work where lines are clear. She smiles at how reputations travel by routes no campaign could plan. Outside, the river takes the last of the light and pulls it thin. The story has become a durable policy, and policy has become a habit. Tomorrow holds no drama on the calendar, which is a kind of triumph she prefers. She steps into the cool and breathes, the work moving beside her at the measured pace she sets. Morning light falls clean across a long table where quarterly ops meet governance. The agenda is blunt: delivery performance, vendor cutover, staff safety metrics, client renewals. She opens by asking for numbers before narratives. Operations reports that alternate suppliers hit 98% on time with 2 reroutes handled without client impact. Warehouses show fewer overnight incidents. A logistics lead explains how a simple card on every dock reads who to call, shaved minutes off decision time. Finance follows with a slide that looks almost boring, which is the compliment everyone wants. Revenue steady, transition costs absorbed, cash predictable. The board listens in the quiet that accompanies well-built systems. Communications presents the blog piece on standards and procedures. It has been reprinted by 2 trade journals and copied, with permission, by a mid-market partner who wanted to align their house to hers. She marks that as the real indicator: policy. Traveling because it works, not because it trends. HR brings a small stack of training evaluations from the holding the room sessions. Comments are practical. The scenarios felt real. The phone tree is taped inside my badge wallet. My boss backed me when I disengaged from a situation that crossed the line. She reads 3 of those aloud so the room hears the tone outside the executive floor. Legal summarizes deposition progress and the neatness of the evidence chain. They request nothing dramatic, only continued patience and careful language. She grants both. A director asks whether the company risks being labeled combative. She answers that standards are not aggression, they're scaffolding. The difference is felt most by the people who stand under them at 2 a.m. The board chair nods and moves the meeting on without the usual orbit of hypotheticals. Afterward, she walks through support, engineering, and fulfillment, asking each team for one improvement that had nothing to do with headlines. Support shows a draft that trims 3 steps from password resets. Engineering ships a small patch that smooths a device handshake for a municipal client. Fulfillment rearranges a staging area so drivers can get in and out with fewer turns. She thanks each group and ties the change to a client's day, because impact is the only currency that compounds inside a company. Midday, she joins the client who had scheduled a 72-hour review. The conversation is short and precise. Screens share timelines and buffer plans. The client's coordinator smiles when the operations lead reads back their constraints before offering options. That simple inversion listening first cools rooms that might otherwise heat up under clocks. The call ends with a sentence she copies down to use again. Thank you for treating our urgency like your own without turning it into drama. In the afternoon, she reviews the draft of the quarterly letter. It opens with products, moves through clients, then lands on governance. The incident merits 5 lines, its lesson expressed as a diagram of decision paths rather than a story. She adds the night shift confidence metric and a commitment to publish it every quarter. She highlights the staff who built the checklists and the guards who stood steady when cameras began to lift. She leaves her own name out of the examples. This is not a fable about a single choice. It's a record of a system doing its job. An invitation arrives from a glossy magazine asking for a cover profile on resilience. She declines, offering a short op-ed instead on the quiet mechanics of standards, the clauses you write before you need them, the forms that make courage easy, the meetings that end on time, because the verbs are strong. The editor accepts. She drafts the piece in one sitting, cuts decoration, and hands it to comms with the instruction to keep the sentences plain. Lately, a courier drops a sealed envelope from the venue. Inside is a hand-signed note from the staff who handled the incident report and a copy of their updated protocol, influenced by her team's checklist. They thank her for treating them as professionals. She pins the note to a corkboard in the small common room where interns make coffee and managers fix slides at odd hours. Culture is built by what gets framed. She frames the right things. As evening leans in, she meets a small circle of junior leaders for office hours. They ask about fatigue, about carrying steadiness without turning numb. She talks about rest like a duty, the run at dawn, the screenless hour, the meal eaten at a table. She tells them authority without recovery becomes brittle, and that brittle fails under heat. They write it down, though she hopes they will practice it instead. Before leaving, she steps onto the balcony that faces the river. The city runs a soft current of sound, manageable and human. The week has dissolved into patterns that will outlast it. Clearer contracts, faster handoffs, steadier voices. She thinks about the stained dress, now archived and labeled, and how some objects finish their job and become records. Then she thinks about what keeps moving. Trucks, code, invoices, care. She checks her phone once, no red flags, only green bars and ordinary questions. She pockets it and breathes. Downstairs, the lobby guard lifts a hand. "Quiet again," he says. She returns the gesture and answers that quiet is the point, not the absence of life, but the presence of order. Outside, the last light slides along the water like a line under a finished sentence. Inside, teams close laptops and set tomorrow in motion. The decision that seemed dramatic when it began has resolved into a standard. Standards, when they do their work, don't shout. They hold. And the company, held by them, goes on. The quarter edges toward its close, with a tempo of checklists that actually move. She begins before sunrise in a small room with glass on two sides, reviewing a wall of printouts pinned in neat rows. Incident chronology, operations cutover, client retention, staff safety metrics, training completion. She marks 3 items for final pass: the ratings agency brief, the audit of public touchpoints, and a quietly important line about shift differentials for guards who stayed late the week of the incident. The last one matters because gratitude without structure leaks. She wants thanks to show up on pay stubs. At 9, she joins a cross-industry call convened by a trade association. The agenda is not her story, it's a shared problem. How sponsors assume risk for guests of guests, and the practical ways to bind behavior that sits just outside contract lines. Lawyers talk in hedging clauses, operations people talk in timelines and phone trees. She bridges them with a single slide, showing the moment where a coordinator hesitates and loses 30 seconds that turn into headlines. The room recognizes the gap. By the end, a working group forms to publish a neutral template that any company can adopt. She volunteers her operations lead and signs off, satisfied that the lesson is leaving her building. Back inside, the analytics team rolls in with a tidy report on second-order effects. A small uptick in qualified applicants continues. Customer satisfaction on post-incident orders has held. Staff confidence on night shift reporting climbed another notch after the holding the room training. She circles one anomaly. A cluster of support tickets shows confusion about when to disengage from abusive callers. She writes a precise script name, the boundary, offer one channel, terminate the call if abuse continues, and asks training to record a 2-minute module by Friday. Legal checks in with a calm update. Deposition sequence largely complete, venue documentation locked, no surprises in discovery. Opposing counsel floats the possibility of a confidential resolution that preserves face. She asks a single question. Does the resolution teach the right lesson? Counsel says it depends on whether an apology is accompanied by structural change. She says structure or nothing, then returns to her calendar without heat. Principles that turn into processes survive, the rest dissolve in sentimental fog. Midday, a client from the public sector visits with a small team to tour the floor and read the room behind the statement. She pairs them with managers who ran the cutover while the news cycle churned. Warehouses describe the new dock cards and the escalation number printed on every badge. Engineering shows a queue that stayed on tempo while headlines tried to pull eyes sideways. Support demonstrates the boundary script and the recovery path when a call goes wrong. The visitors leave with less drama than they expected and more confidence than they arrived with. She recognizes the look. Trust quietly recalibrated by contact with a working system. In the early afternoon, she holds office hours with a handful of interns and junior hires. They ask about courage, as if it were a feeling that shows up on cue. She says, most courage is mechanical. Write the clause before you need it. Rehearse the call you hope you never make. Give people words to borrow when their own vanish under pressure. They take notes and ask if she ever gets angry. She says yes, then adds that anger is private fuel, not public policy. Communications brings a draft of her op-ed, the one she agreed to, in lieu of a glossy profile. She cuts the flourishes and leaves the spine. Standards are verbs, dignity is a condition, systems beat personalities. She adds a short paragraph crediting the people whose names rarely travel guards, coordinators, drivers, because culture that does not tilt toward those who carry the room is performance, not practice. The editor accepts the piece without edits, a small miracle that she files under good alignment. Lately, finance closes the loop on transition costs. Absorbed cleanly, no impact on year-end commitments. They propose a modest fund to underwrite rapid vendor swaps when partners fail standards, so operations never hesitate for fear of budget drama. She approves and names it something unromantic and clear: continuity cushion. Words that behave help money behave. She steps into a small training space where a second wave of holding the room sessions is underway. A facilities tech plays a difficult guest. A junior manager practices the script and clutches the card, then sets it down and tries again from memory. The second take is better. Relief breathes through the room in a way applause never does. She thanks the trainer and the decoy guest, then leaves them to finish without the attention that makes people stiff. Before the building dims, she records a short message for internal channels. We built a standard, we tested it, and it held. We will publish our night shift confidence metric quarterly. We will keep improving the places where people meet us, on the phone, at docks, in halls, so the rules are easy to follow under noise. If you see friction, show it to us. We fix what we can see. She schedules it for morning so it lands with coffee, not fatigue. On the way out, her mentor calls from a porch somewhere quiet. The judge asks how the company sounds now that the microphones have moved on. She says it sounds like work, which is the best sound she knows. The judge laughs softly and says that discipline has a timbre, and once you learn it, you can hear it over any crowd. They hang up with no ceremony. Outside, the river wears a low light. She thinks about the dress boxed on a shelf and the policies that walked out of that night into other rooms and other companies. The incident has become a diagram, then a habit, then a shared map. She unlocks the car and feels the week release its grip. Tomorrow's agenda is product, staffing, a vendor check, and a quiet meeting with guards to review the new shift differential. None of it needs a headline. That is the measure she keeps. A company that holds its line and holds its people, even when nobody's watching. The day opens with a tempered brightness that suits a company settling back into rhythm. She walks into a small room where 3 screens show the same uncomplicated dashboard. Delivery performance, support resolution time, night shift confidence. The last metric ticks up a fraction as overnight reports come in. She takes a photo and sends it to the managers who ran the training, attaching only 2 words: well done. Then she drops into a seat with legal advice to finalize a clean packet for the regulator who asked whether any governance change followed the incident. The packet is dull in the best way. Clause language, escalation tree, timestamp drills, vendor acknowledgements. It reads like a manual, not a manifesto. Communications flags that her op-ed is posted. It travels briskly among operations leaders, risk officers, and venue managers who live in the unglamorous part of safety. She reads the piece once and moves on. The point is not applause, but adoption. A mid-market partner emails to say they pasted the escalation number template directly into their badges. She forwards the note to the team that wrote it and marks the message with a star labeled proof of use. Mid-morning brings a meeting with guards and facilities to review the new shift differential. She keeps the tone straightforward and thanks them by name for the steadiness they provided while phone cameras hovered. One guard raises a concern about late exits through side corridors when a crowd forms. She writes down the route number and asks for a simple fix by week's end, not a study. They sketch it together with a dry erase marker and a practical arrow. Solutions that fit on a whiteboard tend to work in real corridors. In product, a quiet demo shows progress on a feature promised to a municipal client who never cared about last week's noise. The designer moves through the flow with the small pride of someone who shipped under pressure. She asks what rough edge remains and hears about a confusing label that trips new users. They change it live and agree to ship a patch by Thursday. The calm attention to unloud details steadies the room more than any speech. A message from counsel arrives. Opposing side suggests a charitable collaboration tied to reconciliation language. She reads it, pauses, and replies that charity should not be a laundering mechanism for conduct. If they want to fund scholarships, they can do so without her company's name or a staged handshake. She sends a separate note to the nonprofit director she briefed earlier, confirming that bridge funds remain secure and not contingent on any external gesture. Stability should never feel like a bargaining chip. After lunch, a small roundtable gathers to test the new tabletop exercise for vendor summits in other cities. The scenario is a mundane one by design. A contractor belittles a junior staffer at a loading dock while time-sensitive inventory arrives in the wrong sequence. The group practices who calls whom, how to pause without panic, and how to restart with dignity intact. A vendor rep points out a missing step for after-hours transportation when a staffer chooses to leave a hostile scene. They add it immediately. She writes a note in the margin that reads, "Remember the ride home." The analytics team returns with a curiosity. Customer satisfaction rose slightly after the incident among accounts that received proactive check-ins. She resists the temptation to draw a line of causation and instead turns the finding into a practice. Every high-sensitivity account will get a steady, boring call the week after any disruption, with 2 questions and 1 promise. What did you feel? What can we tighten? We will not make you carry our problems. Late afternoon, she records a 3-minute video for new hires titled, "How We Hold the Room." She speaks plainly about sequence, tone, and the relief that comes when rules are written down before they are tested. She mentions guards, coordinators, drivers, and the invisible work that steadies a company so engineers and salespeople can do theirs. The last line lands without flourishing. Our standard is not a speech. It is a series of small, common decisions taken the same way every time. As the building thins, a skeptical board member drops by. Not combative, just thorough. He asks whether she worries the stance will scare off ambitious partners. She answers that ambitious partners who respect boundaries become better partners, and those who do not save everyone years of trouble by revealing it early. He nods and concedes that predictability is a competitive edge. They walk the floor in companionable quiet and stop at support, where a rep points to the desk card used that morning to de-escalate a call. The card looks ordinary. That is its strength. On her way down, she checks a message from her mentor. A simple question. Does the company sound like itself again? She replies that it sounds like work. Outside, the river carries a strip of late sun along its edge. A truck rumbles past with tomorrow's inventory. A junior manager leaves the building laughing softly at something ordinary. The incident has hardened into policy, and policy has settled into habit. She breathes the clean evening air and thinks about the next release, the next training, the next quiet improvement that will never trend and will matter more than anything that does. Tomorrow's list waits on a whiteboard, brief and exact, and not one line requires a headline to be worth doing. The quarter closes on a morning that feels unremarkable in the best sense. She arrives before most, passes a card of copy paper, and steps into a room with ordinary light. On the table sits a slim stack, the final vendor acknowledgments, the regulator's thank you note for a clean packet, a brief from analytics on staff confidence, and a 1-page client renewal signed overnight. Nothing in the pile demands a speech. She reads each item, underlines 2 dates, and sends 3 short notes of thanks with specifics attached, so credit lands where work happened. She spends an hour with operations walking the floor plan for a new cross-dock lane that will shave minutes off morning handoffs. The team has taped colored arrows on concrete to simulate the route. They run boxes through the pattern, call times out loud, and note where bodies naturally cluster. She asks for 1 adjustment at the turn near the loading bay so drivers clear the corner without brushing past support desks. The crew moves tape, rolls the next pallet, and watches the path smooth. Small geometry, large effect. A public sector client arrives with a compact team for their renewal meeting. They do not bring cameras or flourish. Screens light, numbers stand. The client lead asks 1 question about continuity budgets and nods when finance explains the cushion set aside for rapid vendor swaps. She keeps her remarks short and finishes by returning to the same sentence she has used all month. We keep our house steady so you don't have to worry about ours while you're doing yours. The room exhales. pens move. After lunch, she meets HR and facilities to confirm the new side corridor route and the updated sign package for nights with heavy foot traffic. They choose fonts anyone can read in a hurry and arrows that make sense from waist height when a person is carrying boxes or guarding a door. A facilities lead suggests adding a small QR code that calls the escalation line directly. They print a test, scan it in the hall, and hear the ring cut through office noise. It works. She circles the code with a pen and writes, "Roll out by Tuesday." Legal drops in with a draft stipulation from opposing counsel. No admissions, mutual non-disparagement, and a private letter that will live in a file rather than on a stage. She scans the text, checks the clause citations, and asks one question about follow-through. What changes in their house tomorrow at 9 a.m.? Counsel points to an attached policy revision on guest conduct and vendor training. She nods. Structure, not sentiment. She signs and moves the folder to the done stack. In a small studio, she records a 2-minute welcome for new vendor partners. The message is plain. Here is how we work. Here is who to call. Here is what happens when a line is crossed. No flourish, no edge. She thanks the people who will carry it at 2 a.m. so others can sleep. The take is clean on the first try. The technician smiles and says nothing more than good. She prefers that word to praise. Late afternoon brings a round table with warehouse leads, support, and junior managers. Each brings a minor friction to the surface and leaves with a fix. A driver needs easier access to spare handhelds after midnight. IT sets a locker with badge access near the dock. A support rep wants a shorter path to loop a manager when a caller refuses boundary language. Training edits the script and laminates a new card. A junior manager asks how to back a decision in the moment without stalling the room. She offers a simple model. Name the rule, name the next step, move. They practice it once. The second run is smoother. Her mentor calls as the room empties. The judge asks what she will remember when the quarter is far behind. She looks at the tape on concrete, the stack of quiet documents, the QR code sign leaning against a chair. Probably not the night itself, she says, but the way the company learned to put verbs where pride used to go. The judge laughs softly and says that's how cultures harden in the right direction. They end the call without ceremony. At dusk, she writes the closing paragraph of the quarterly letter. It mentions product shipped, clients kept, routes improved, and the night shift metric they will publish every 3 months. She thanks the guards by name again and the event staff who sent their updated protocol. The incident occupies one line as a hinge that swung a heavier door into place. She deletes a metaphor that tries too hard and leaves the paragraph spare. Before she leaves, she visits the shelf where the dress sits in a labeled box. Not as a trophy and not as a wound, as a record that did its work. She closes the cabinet and takes the long way out, through support and down the stairwell that opens near the loading bay. A driver passes with a nod and a quiet goodnight. The air smells faintly of cardboard and clean stone, the scent of work that made its way from idea to motion. Outside, the river carries a soft band of late light. There are no microphones at the curb, no urgent knocks on glass. The company sounds like itself again. Phones, wheels, clipped footsteps, muted laughter near an elevator. She thinks about tomorrow's list, a release review, a training audit, a check-in with the nonprofit director, and a walkthrough of the new corridor once the signs go up. None of it needs an audience. All of it matters. She gets into the car, gives her address, and watches the city settle into the evening. Quiet sits beside her, not as emptiness, but as proof that standards held.